this talk will be split between Sophie Beck, who's in CCQ, and we'll be talking about JOS, which I just submitted a submission to, a paper submission, and K's Wong in CCA, who will be talking about, what's the thing called? Show your work, which I don't know anything about clearly. So Sophie, all you.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks for hanging around on a Friday afternoon. Right, I'm a associate research scientist at CCQ, and I'm also an editor at JOS for the last 6 months or so. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how it works and the design. So before I start, I want to acknowledge, or I want to say that most of the material is taken from previous talks by track editors listed up here. Okay, this is not great. Discussion with Dan Furman-Mackey. I guess you can all guess which track he's editing. And then support from my own track editor and Rachel, who's my editorial buddy. There's a lot of interesting statistics on this webpage if you want to know more about JOS. And then the original paper where it was published. And I also want to say that JOS is an affiliate of the Open Source Initiative, and is also sponsored by NumFocus. Okay, so we've heard a little bit about this already. So the basic question, do we really need another journal? And I guess I would say the answer is yes. So the research software developer's dilemma is basically, how do you get credit for research software? So let's say you've written a nice piece of software for your research application, and it works, which is great. And now you're thinking about, well, your time is running out, you're thinking about your next position, so what do you do? So you can only choose one of these typically. Let's say you decide you write a paper. This is going to make you happy because you get another job, maybe, hopefully. So this is kind of like a benefit for your personal career, but usually it means that the software, is not going to get developed or documented as nicely as it should be in order to benefit others. So paper writing takes time and effort, and that's often at the cost of the software. And also, software is dynamic, and papers are a snapshot in time. So let's say after you submitted your paper, you decide to, I don't know, change everything up. And then nobody's gonna be able to follow this because you've written the instructions in the paper. But what really saves you here, that probably you're the only one who's able to run your software anyway, because you haven't written or haven't invested time in the documentation. So the other alternative, and by documentation, by the way, I mean the whole thing: functionality documentation, examples, installation instructions, automated tests, continuous integration, community guidelines, and license. And this is a lot of work. So let's say you decide, okay, your career isn't that important. You spend the whole, you spend your time on the software. This is great for the, for the greater good of the community. But the software by itself is not always recognized as research productivity. And so this is the problem, and this is where JOS comes in. JOS is a developer-friendly, free, open access journal that specifically focuses on research software. The goal is to improve the software quality, and at the same time provide some way of getting credit for the developers while keeping the workload minimal. And so it uses an open submission and review process that's all on GitHub. So the author, the reviewers, and the editor, they all see the same information. And also, it is a collaborative review process. So this is quite different to standard, let's say, papers in our field anyway. Just anecdotally, in one of my first submissions, it turned out that one of the reviewers asked, okay, but I don't know, what about, you don't have any API documentation? And so the authors decided to take a break and add this. And once it got back, like, I was basically, as the editor, I was so excited for them, because they put so much work in it and made the software so much better. So this collaborative spirit is really also important here. And then once your submission goes through, you get a Crossref DOI as a citable credit. So how does it work? What are the submission criteria? It needs to be open source. It has to have an OSI approved license. It needs to have an obvious research application. It needs to be feature complete, no half-baked solutions, and it needs to be significant. And it also needs to meet a substantial scholarly effort test, which basically means that it has to be more effort than, or like at least 3 months of work for a single author. So the submission itself is pretty simple. So there's an article, which is basically just a pointer. It should contain a short abstract, which is an advertisement, a statement of need, a list of authors, link to the repo and the archived software and key references. But it should not contain descriptions of the API and research results, because the description of the API should all be in your Git repo anyway. The code review, as I mentioned, focuses on functionality documentation, examples, installation instructions, automated tests, and so on. So basically, the reviewers will go through, will pretend they're a potential user, will have to install it, will have to make sure that the claims are, claims are correct and that the documentation is adequate. So how does it work? So everything's hosted on this website. If you have a well-documented code, then the submission process should take no more than an hour. So basically, you just put in your repository address, short description, software number, and so on. Maybe Jason can comment if an hour is adequate. And once you hit submit, this automatically generates a pre-review, actually. And then there's going to be a scope check and finding editors, and then it goes to the review. So this is what the review process looks like. It's entirely on GitHub, as I mentioned. And it's basically a discussion between the editor, author, and the reviewers. And then there's also another, another person, well, not a person, it's editorial bot, who takes over some of the automatic stuff, like generating a PDF from Markdown and assigning people to do certain things and so on. Okay, so this is the publication workflow. So you make a software available in your repository, you add an OSI approved license and a short markdown paper, which really is just a pointer to your Git repo. You submit to JOS, and then you get this handle to your Git repo. And then the editor-in-chief reviews the size and scope and assigns an editor if it's in scope. If it's out of scope, it's rejected. If it's in scope, the editor finds 2 or more reviewers who then go ahead and start reviewing. And what is important here, that this is not like a monolithic kind of review where you're like, the editor pings the reviewers over and over, and at some point you get like a whole list of things that are wrong with this stuff. It's more like a discussion, really. Like if you're a reviewer, you can also just come in and say like, okay, I tried the installation, this didn't work, I'll come back next time and do whatever. And so then at the same time, the author can start working on fixing the issues. And let's say everything's fine. At the end, the paper is accepted. You archive your software and you get a JOS DOI, and that's it. And you have something to cite. Okay, as for the business model, so this is JOS is based on things that are already out there. So the website is hosted on Heroku. The reviews happen on GitHub. Software archiving, you can use Zenodo or Figshare. Paper compilation is based on Pandoc, metadata and DOIs, Crossref. And so as in terms of business model, this is really at minimal cost and volunteer-based. So JOS pays $275 per year for the Crossref membership. It pays $1 per article for a DOI, and then the web application on Heroku is $90 per month. So that amounts to about $3 to $6 per manuscript. So that's not a lot. And actually, I think at the beginning, I think the entire thing was paid for by the person who started JOS, the editor-in-chief, Arfan Smith. Okay, so as for the publication statistics, JOS publishes about 1 paper per day. We're now at about 350 papers per year. So it was founded in May 2016, and then also about 25% of the submissions are rejected before review, let's say if they're not in scope, right? This is maybe more of a fun fact. These are the most cited articles as of today. So they have citations up to 7,000 for the tidyverse, which I think is an R program. The other 3, I think the next 3 are Python, another R program, and collecting more citations every day. So this is the editorial team. Consists of the editorial board. So each of these editors is handling a specific track, for example, astrophysics or physics and engineering and so on. And then there's about 80 or so editors which come and go, usually hired or let's say onboarded for a year, potentially with extension. So I'm almost finished. So so as I mentioned, this is a community effort, volunteer-based. So if you want to contribute, that would be great. there's always we're always looking for reviewers, so you can sign yourself up or get enlisted in a reviewer board. And if you have something that could be of interest to you or that you could be able to review, we're going to pin you on GitHub. There's currently also a call for editors. I can share the link in Slack later as well. Okay, and in summary, a JOS paper is basically a solution to the research software developers dilemma, where you can receive both feedback for your software, improve the quality of the software, and at the same time collect citations for your academic career. And it really moves towards the open science movement. So having like open review processes on GitHub and being extremely transparent with every part of the process. Okay, happy to take questions. Thanks.
It would have been less than an hour, but I idiotically thought I could call the paper something other than paper.md.
No.
Otherwise, it would have been less than an hour. Questions? Yes.
Is there sort of a policy if like, you have some software and let's say it does sort of change dramatically over time, can you submit a second publication or a revision to the first one?
Yeah, Niels just asked that in the break. I'm not entirely sure. I know a paper that, one submission I have right now, they have a previous paper about their software 10 years ago, where it still was closed source and a different state of the manuscript of the software. So you can kind of republish it, but I think it needs to be like substantially extension, so you can't just like get out a new paper every year. So there needs to be some. I'm not sure exactly of the criteria.
Just to mention on that, CPC, I mean the communication field, has a policies of update papers, and maybe we should look into it.
Yeah, I'm curious about how you see the research software developer dilemma evolving.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is a great solution towards that. I know that a place like the Flatiron Institute will, encourage both aspects. Academia in the broader sense seems to me to be very strongly biased towards, research in a narrow sense.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see this changing? Do you see this evolving?
I think so, from what I can tell. So if anybody asked about the impact factor, so there's there's a San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment, where a bunch of scientists from all fields basically signed that the assessment of research productivity is really a little bit last century, and we have to move towards evaluating productivity in a different way, and research software being one part of this. So I do hope I am hopeful that things are moving, but probably very slow. But I think the Flatiron Institute can also contribute by that, because we're extremely privileged on that account, right?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes. I had a related question. You mentioned, I think, Crossref, and how this is. So this is a journal. There is a reference, so it's in the database in Google Scholar and all of this. But is it taken by Web of Science, for example, on big database? Because some of the people are nervous, that the work is not visible when you apply for grants in some of these institutions. So what's the situation there?
I'm not 100% sure. I know that Google Scholar, for example, has not responded to requests of like being, referencing and collecting citations for a long time. I'm not sure it does by now, actually. I have to ask, but I know that the metadata, everything's there. I think you just have to I don't know, give them some time maybe, or push. I know, but you can given that it's been around for 7 years now, increasing citations, I think it's gonna, they can try to avoid its try to ignore its existence, but I think at some point, yeah.
Sometimes Google Scholar takes a lot of time, but things usually end up there eventually.
Yeah.
Anything else? 50 seconds?
I mean, sure.
Yes.
I'm just curious about the distribution of languages and also sort of areas of science and things like that. Is it? Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. Wow.
I think mostly Python and R and Julia making some appearance. That's from what I can tell, from what I can see. So this, I think this counts like all, the entire repository input.
Wow, MATLAB.
Yeah, MATLAB is
is very lowest.
Yeah, MATLAB is very.
There's more Makefile than C++.
I mean, this, yeah, so it's different than the usage out there, but it
Right.
just has to penetrate those communities somehow.
Yeah, definitely.
There's lowercase MATLAB.
Oh,
yeah, so this plot has some problems,
sorry,
but yeah.
I didn't see that.
This is also from May, but there's, as I mentioned, there's this nice analytics webpage where you can get more insights into this stuff. I'm not sure if it just actually counts lines, because that could also mean that Python just, has too many lines, codes of lines. I don't know. It's a rough idea, let's say.
Heck, #1 is an interesting thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
I think so.
right. So, okay, why don't we thank Sophie and go to Case.
Hello, everyone. I'm Case. I'm a research fellow at CCA. Over lunch, Jeff was asking me whether I'm ready for my flash talk, and as I'm ready to trash talk about show your work. I'm merely a contributor, like a very small one. I don't work on that, but I am a user of show your work. I'm going to tell you something that I like about show your work, and something that is, work in progress, not by me, but Dan, Foreman, Mackey, and CCA mostly. Okay, so what is this thing? What is Magical Beast? Before I go into that, I want to set the stage that I think, because most people in FWAM or in an institute, some part of it, it's more working on the math and computational side, which we understand reproducibility, but I don't think we really on the same page. So one thing that in astrophysics, this is 2014, there's a team of astrophysicists that they claim they found gravitational wave, which is very important stuff in physics, for the first time through looking at the cosmic microwave background. It's like some astrophysical object, and they show a picture. And later on, instead of finding gravitational wave and proving inflation and stuff like that, people proved that actually you didn't find those. You actually found dust. And the way that they get the result is pretty questionable. Basically, someone go on a conference, take a picture, analyze that picture, and claim some very important stuff. That's not great. And more recently, there's this guy, LK99, that people write, oh well, we got it, and publish a paper, and it's sent out like a frenzy of people trying to make room temperature superconductor. If you want room temperature superconductor, just go to Siberia. You like immediately get your room temperature. So that's also questionable methodology. And one thing that like these days I work on is machine learning, and this is the states of machine learning. You have some paper that's like the last paper kind of sucked, we beat them, and then you like 2 months later you get another paper that talk about that, and it's like it's very, very questionable reproducibility. So I think it's really important to get down to the nitty-gritty, because in math and all that you can just, oh, this is the algorithm, you run it on this experiment, it works. But then maybe in astrophysics I feel like I have a little bit more room to talk about astrophysics, because I work on that. It's like fundamentally, if I just read the paper, there's no way that I tell whether your figure is just like you painting or you actually generate some scientific data, really. And until I can systematically reproduce your result. Otherwise, what's the difference between that and the painting? So that's where show your work was originally created, is to achieve this purpose, that it has a workflow management tool to facilitate, I won't say it's like complete solution, but facilitate reproducible, extensible, transparent, and also awesome paper that will do a couple of things, and we'll see very quickly like what they do. And to use show your work is fairly simple. You just install the package through pip and clone a repo. But actually, there's a like easier way to do this. Now, show your work has some built-in functionality to set up your repo. Then you call build, and your article is generated, done. All the features there are awesome. So what does that actually look like? What's the end product of a reproducible or a paper that built by show your work looks like? So let's look at one of my paper. I don't know why this is a little bit pixelated, but this is what doing embedding. And this is a paper that I published. This is the archive version, but now it's like published in journal, which looks a little bit different. That we talk about this. The science doesn't matter, but the important thing is like look at the amazing figures that we have. So we have like these figures, and you know there's a lot of this complicated thing that you can just like, is this correct, is that correct? And the good thing about these papers now, it comes with like these cute icon that you can let's say I click on this guy, and that will bring me, oh god, I don't want to go all the way. Let's see if I can do control. There we go. Then it will bring me to a repo that holds the script and hopefully the data that generate this figure. And so every figure in that paper that we publish comes with the data and the code that reproduce this. So in principle, our, you know, whoever want to reproduce our stuff can go to our repo and click some button, and you'll get the whole thing. And of course, we also have the tag that is like written somewhere and all that. And every time you make a change, oh god, some GitHub action will be launched, and to, you know, make sure that your paper can be viewed, which is important, right? Like sometimes they say, oh, my stuff is perfect. You just download this binary somewhere, set up an environment over there, you click build, and it's magically done. But then you try to do that, it's like, okay, dependency break, what the hell? So this makes sure that, you know, if there's any errors underneath, anything that's went awry, then you can at least address that. So there's that. But yeah. Okay, and there's like another newer version of that, like that is also built, and you get like this cute stem there, but the idea is the same. You can do the linkage to the script, like to figure or equation or wherever you want to put that reference in. But figure is first, I think it's like first class citizen that every figure has to have a script, kind of. Otherwise, that kind of defeats the purpose. And also, let me stress that sometimes computation that we do is huge, and you don't want to run it on like a machine that is spin up on GitHub Action. So if you have auxiliary data that, let's say, just simulation output, then you can put it on like some external server like Zenodo that will have all the run stuff, and you can be as detailed as you want. And you know, we kind of, I mean, the developer kind of build it in a way that to encourage people to as detailed as possible, that you put sometimes not only the output, but also the version of your code that generate the output, the configuration files that generate the output there, so that you make sure it's more reproducible than you know, just the data or just the plot, because you know, okay, then we back to the painting area. Okay, so to briefly show you how a paper will look like, and that's basically that. Okay, you have the README that briefly describes stuff. You don't need to set up any of the make file. There's a template on the show your work that you just really clone. Or if you install the package, then you click show your work that we're trying to set up that boilerplate for you. And most of the things that you do goes into this source files. Your data, okay, I'm an offender in terms of like using, you know, GitHub infrastructure. If I think it's like small enough, it's like, ah, crap, I'm not gonna do as an Zenodo. I'm just gonna put it on GitHub. Don't follow that. It's a bad practice. We're not here to talk about bad practice. We're going to talk good practice. So, you know, there are scripts that, you know, like the how the figure get generated are all here, and you can specify dependency and stuff like that. And your paper, your BIP are over there. Okay, so that's really the thing that you write. And there's more customization that you can do, but mainly it's the scripts and the tech. I actually have a and the typical tech files that you put are in, you know, this guy. Okay. By the way, any question, you know, just stop me. So you really write your paper like how it looks like. And the only thing that is a little bit like one line difference in the tag. Let me see if I can find it. Where's the figure? There you go. So instead of just include the graphics, I think now you have to also say which script this is corresponding to. Okay, so every graph that you put in your paper has to come with a script, and that's good, right? Like, you know, make sure it's more reproducible. Okay, so that's kind of like a whirlwind to show. There's more detail if you're interested in using that. We can talk about that more, but I think this is rather auxiliary. Let's actually skip through this. Now I'm gonna shit talk about it. It was just like the part that I like. So one thing that is troubling me a lot is I want to write my paper, and like when I type something, I don't want everything to compile and take 30 seconds to see my paper again, which is kind of one of the problem that we have now. Is actually, depending on what stage you're at, it doesn't necessarily be super bad, but sometimes it can be quite annoying that can I not just write and see the changes, but no, I need to like compile and all that. So that adds some mental overhead. The other thing is like there's this dependency on conda, which I absolutely hate. If there are SCC people here, you realize that once in a while there's this CCA lunatic that will generate a lot of files in the home. And that's because we're using Show Your Work to create, and it depends on conda, and every time you write a new paper, it kind of like, put a conda there, which is bad. The other thing is like, we talk about a lot of reproducibility and how this is great for making a paper that people can follow. But in the end of the day, it really depending on the user practice. For example, some of my paper, I have the data files there and I have a figure there, but it's, how do we generate the data and what machine, the dependency in the cluster side, that is not, tracked down to like bit-to-bit level as of now. Again, like, this is just some of the problem I had before, but we're working on, like Dan is working a lot on resolving this problem. So hopefully we'll get like a better version in the near future. Now, yes.
Can I ask?
Yes.
I don't understand if Show Your Work runs, or GitHub Actions or something runs the scripts for the figures every time you push the master or something. Is that, or and do they have to be Python scripts? And there's many questions, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think it necessarily has to be Python. It's that whatever can be ran on a GitHub action, then they can be triggered and ran. And as of now, I think they recombine. I think it actually sometimes it does something smarter to cache the result. Like if it doesn't change the script, then it won't change the result. I'm not exactly sure about the internal, but I'm sure that like it doesn't run like a full n-body simulation on something like that. But usually, if you have a huge simulation, then we encourage that you stage out the results somewhere, and maybe also keep the configuration and the version of the code that you used to generate the data file exactly somewhere else. But in the plotting script, you really run the plotting. Was that making sense?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. What if the plotting is expensive? Like if it's some 3D rendering of something?
Oh, your host, I think.
Your host.
Okay, we need to be smart about that. But I mean, there's also always an option of paying. There's more runtime on action, but that's not a great solution. So I think it's whatever that is too expensive, it's usually not great on action. I think the original developer of Show Your Work tends to work thing that is less computational expensive. So he really have everything. You really produce the result on the GitHub action. Whereas I do things that is more expensive and require cluster. So I will put my data somewhere. And there are, that discussion about this. And I think that's something that we need to address going forward. Yeah.
I noticed in the text there that you had a PNG in the actual LaTeX.
Oh, the text, yeah.
Is there something that ties that PNG to the output of the script?
I think so. So in the Show Your Work YAML, they will basically set the dependency of the script. Like, for example, you see, oh, this script will require these output, require this input, and it will produce so on and so on output. Like it's like specified somewhere. So this is like something that I gloss over, but this is basically how related to how the internal of Show Your Work. So basically, it built a DAG, a direct acyclic graph that track all the different components. Like for example, you have data set that goes here and there. There's cache, there's figure. It tracks that and know how everything depending on each other. And when you compile, it makes sure that every bit of that graph is generated, or so it has that knowledge. That's basically what the internal Show Your Work. So like, good. I'm very happy with the question, but like this is one thing that I basically want to give you my elevator pitch is like whether you should think about or what is the benefit of using Show Your Work. To me, I think the reproducibility part is great, but the main lifesaver for me is when I work with my student. They usually, I have a lot of summer students, and I mandatorily require them to all you Show Your Work because now the the analysis script or the plotting script is online, and the tech is online. And if they screw something out, look at the figures, like this doesn't look quite right. I have direct access to it. So in terms of workflow, it benefit a lot. I don't need to ask the students, like, I don't like this line, change it. I was like, okay, let me go back to the cluster, download all this thing, change it. And later, 2 weeks later, they show up with the same graph. It's like, okay, what the fuck? So that's not good. But now I can go on to GitHub and it's like, just do this. And I can actually just change that and it will be dynamically updated on GitHub. So that's great. I don't need to like manage all the dependency that is all there. So that's awesome. And if I work with student, I highly recommend it. It's a huge lifesaver. And at the end of the day, you just yell at the students, like, figure that out, and they show up with the benefits. Like, why not? But like there are cases that I would say maybe it's not as mature as if you work with a long list of co-author that it's not necessarily very familiar with show your work, and you can't yell at them, and that's induced quite a lot of mental overhead and stuff that you need to learn. Show your work, you need to install that, make sure everyone oblige, and so that may be like later, not now yet. But yeah, so hopefully if you're curious or anything, CCA is very hyped about like show your work, and we more than glad to talk about show your work. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks, Kays. Any quick question? And I guess, Evan, you can set up. Any questions? Yes, Vikram.
In cases where you can't tie generation of the figure to compilation of the LaTeX, like if you were using expensive calculations to make the figure or commercial software to make the figure or something like that, is there any advantage to using show your work over just including a link to a place where all your data are?
Yeah, I think like my take on this is like somewhat an opinionated take, which is I think if there's structure and opinionated structure to how you can structure thing, it's better for communication. For example, if you have like your simulation, so that you can still say what configuration and what version software that you use, and you can put it there, and at least it gets funneled through the show your work part. Then the structure there is more standard, instead of like 30 people have their own way to put their simulation and configuration out. So I guess when we scale up, it's better to have a little bit more structure. So that's what I see the benefit. It's not huge benefit, but it's some benefit.
Okay, I think we should maybe go to the next session. Thanks again to Kays.